Today's guest is Rachel Brooks, who is an entrepreneur and CEO who brings women together through her passion for empowering women to become the best version of themselves, personally and professionally. She's the founder of The Confident Woman, a lifestyle and media brand that aims to educate, inspire, and empower women to create lasting change from within. Rachel is also the published author of the 4 times global award-winning book, Chasing Perfection: A Journey to Healing, Fitness, and Self-Love. And in addition to that, is also the host of the Confident Woman podcast and creator and founder of the lifestyle apparel brand, I Am Athletics. So, Rachel, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. And even just reading like your bio, it's like a laundry list of really cool things that you have done. So why don't you just give us a little bit more context on that and like break down like how did you get to doing what you're doing? What is it that you're about now? Kind of floor is yours for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I basically got started because really how everything all comes together, kind of what you had read in my bio, was actually through my own personal experiences. When I first got started into really the space of fitness and health, several years back, it was because after a lifelong struggle of body dysmorphia, eating disorders, disordered eating, self-image, self-esteem, just really struggling with those issues for the big bulk of my life. So I turned to fitness as a way to control and manipulate how I physically looked, because that was something that was praiseworthy. It's where beauty and standards and excellence and all the things that were really externally I was chasing. I was looking for that perfect body, perfect life, perfect marriage, perfect business, all the things perfect, because I thought then if I had achieved this sense of perfection, then I could just stop the inner chase, that battle that was just always on, feeling this drive that I have to perform and produce to such a high caliber that eventually it had led me to just crash and burn. And when I had hit my bottom, like my rock bottom at that time, I really was forced to look inward and discover, like, one, how did I get here? Two, how to prevent that from happening again. And it was at this bottom of my pit is where I really had to take that deep dive into, accountability and awareness, and take inventory of all the things that led me to where I am or was at that point. And so in this rebuild stage that I had to embark on, like, several years back, which was really this ground up approach. What was it that I wanted to do? What was it that I wanted to achieve? What was this version of myself? What does she look like? And I started really asking myself some really thought provoking questions that took this deep dive in to address all the past, and then have now created this vision for the future of this woman I want to be. And in this present moment is where I started to get to work. I took inventory. I basically sifted and sorted through all the pieces of my life and collectively decided if those were going to be carried in the future, or if I needed to discard them, or the things that I needed actively at that present moment to build out this life that I wanted. And so through my own transformation journey, which was the journey to healing, fitness, and self-love, I, for the first time, had experienced something I had never encountered before. And I actually thought that that was for other people. And it was the spark of confidence. And I was like, well, what is this thing? It feels really cool and like new and exciting, but what is this? And the more I started really stepping into this and chipping away day by day, one step at a time, I was building this confidence that I thought was sought externally. And this confident woman, this version of me that I didn't even think that I was entitled to, I thought this is, again, was for other people, not me, was kind of birthed and formed. And through this journey, things started to align, things started to click, the vision was unfolding. I was now creating this future version here in the physical reality of today. And that was so exciting and so, like, just it was, I'm like almost at a loss of words, because it's like something you can't explain until you have experienced it yourself. And when I was going through this journey, coming out and now going back into the fitness space, so I'm also a former fitness competitor. I now took everything that I had learned and applied and stepped on stage now as this new version of myself, and just was at this highest point in my life where this was living. This was life. The things that I had wanted and saw externally for everybody else wasn't, something that you can just earn or achieve. It's something that you're innately born with. And those were the gifts that were instilled inside of me. But that journey of self-discovery led me to look within. And so from a fitness standpoint, that had really empowered me now, like, don't look at fitness just as a physical. You have to practice your fitness and get fit from within. And so that was really the uncovering of mental, emotional, and spiritual, while the physical then became a byproduct of that inner fitness. And so through all the inner work that I have done, I have actually looked back now at different aspects and versions of myself throughout this journey and said, okay, Rachel needed this back then. And how can I create something for somebody who is also maybe just a step behind me, who is going to need for what I'm building out? And as an entrepreneur, that's something that I'm through and through have been, I would claim this for like my entire life, because at early age of 8, I was already on my first entrepreneurial, venture, and it led me into where I'm at. And so from that point, I have always had this mantra that if it doesn't exist, create it. And so that had been something that was creatively inspiring, and bringing in my entrepreneurial gifts and talents, where now I can create programs, products, services, books, guides, podcasts, all the things that enrich a woman's life, that I was that woman who needed all these things. And so now it's an opportunity for me to give back and serve to those who are also on a quest to becoming their best and most confident self. And so that's why I always say, like, before the world tries to tell you who you should be, look within and discover who you're created to be.
So I think firstly, I just want to thank you for sharing all of that so eloquently, because I know, obviously there's so much nuance and depth in that lived experience, but like it's just, I get, and again, I understand it's like Cole's Notes version, but like it's so nicely articulated. And the reason that I want to point that out is, there's a lot of themes in what you said that come up often on the podcast that are resonant of my own journey as well. Um, but the one thing you even mentioned offline is, okay, well, I'm kind of here. I'm very self-aware. I want to kind of explore where all of this is going. And that level of articulation can only come from somebody that actually walks that talk. Like a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm, into personal development. I do my thing, but it's like, there's just a different flavor when like you hear somebody speak about it, you're like, yes, like this person has like done this more than just superficially, right? So nothing really to add. I just wanted to reflect that back to you, because it was so beautifully articulated, and I know there's a lot to that story that, even if just going to the story bit, there's a lot that we could dive into. So number one, I just want to acknowledge you for that. And then number two, just to kind of move this into, I guess, the second phase of this, because you are so self-aware, you do know how to navigate a lot of these waters. Like, what is it that I can support you with the most today?
I think overall, just it's great to kind of have this outside perspective. Like, I can only see my life through the lens of both past and present. And I have this future version that kind of becomes now the goal, right? So that's the path that I'm walking. But I what I love about, when we talk about like personal growth and discovery, is I love storytelling. This is what I do a lot about on my podcast. And in fact, this is why I wrote my book, which is a hybrid of memoir and self-help. So it's through storytelling, just connection and communication, that you see the relatability in all walks of life. And it's almost like whatever you're experiencing, other people have had a similar version. And we can't discount that, because a lot of times in this journey, we do feel isolated and alone. And I think what's great is just having this dialogue, this conversation, this honest approach is like, hey, let's talk about some of these hard things. Let's talk about some of the obstacles that you will be encountering as you maybe come around the corner, turn the bend, things like that on this journey. And so to answer your question, I think what's great about this is that we can have a conversation and kind of open our eyes and perspective to something different that we haven't yet experienced, or maybe we already know it, but maybe we just, we can't think of everything all simultaneously, and we can't remember everything either. So it's always great to have sometimes those reminders, or just that aha moment.
Beautiful. So in that case, if you kind of zoom out a little bit, like what are the top problems or the top challenges that you're facing right now?
I would say, in this current season I'm in, I would say for me personally, just navigating this new version of who I am. Sometimes what I've learned is that my brain doesn't work like most people's do. And for me, I've always felt like I've had to swim upstream. Things have always been against the grain, so much harder and longer to accomplish the things that I had set out to do. So it's always great to kind of have somebody else's perspective on that, because I feel like a lot of times misunderstood, because the way my brain works is not typical brain for most people.
Got it. So out of those things, so you mentioned navigating this new version of who I am and always having to go against the grain and being misunderstood for it and things taking longer. Which out of those two seems most relevant to bring in right now? Like this new version or the against the grain bit?
Well, I think it kind of they overlap each other, because you can't have one without the other. This new version of me is now kind of like this awakening process to, yeah, it's your brain isn't a neurotypical brain. And how to navigate now understanding that, but yet still feeling confident in who I am, and going about my mission in life, my purpose in life, feeling confident and supported, and figuring out ways that I guess make sense to me, so that I don't have to always feel like everything's twice as hard.
Okay. So given that you've achieved a lot already, why do you think this is an issue now versus something you've already overcome?
Because you still get burned out probably twice as fast too, because you're doing everything twice as hard. So there's a lot of this burnout, exhaustion. I'm looking for preservation of energy and time, and being more efficient and effective, versus constantly feeling like I'm a little bit more on the reactive side, but constantly in the state that of always being on and always doing, um, which is great for a lot of those accomplishments, but is it sustainable? No, it's not. And then this is the season that I have just come out of, that from what I learned from my first lesson of hitting rock bottom is I saw the bottom coming. That's when I just hit the eject button, and I just parachuted myself out of it before I crashed and burned. So there's part of this like awareness aspect of it, but you still see it coming, because sometimes you lose sight. The way I understand, for those listening, ADHD is something that is debilitating and crippling if it's not managed or under control. And so having that kind of newer understanding of it has now given me insight to slow down a bit. But sometimes what I do experience is like that time blindness. So I will just go all in on that hyper focus mode. And that's when I could say I have to pick my head up and be like, "Ooh, we're getting too close to that wall. We got to slow down. We got to pace ourselves. We got to, be more of on the responding side versus reactant side." So that's kind of this new version that I'm in, is I'm trying to navigate now a rebuild of my life. And I say that because there was for last year, there was a lot of, in my personal life and in my professional life, there was a lot of just mix, right? And so when I had to decide what I wanted to carry forward into this new version of me, a lot of things fell to the wayside. And so I kind of repeated the same process of how I collected myself and moving into this new version here today now, versus where I was from that first crash landing. So understanding all of this together, and now having that understanding of that my brain just doesn't work the way other people's do, it doesn't mean that it's an excuse. It just now means I have to navigate something that is new entirely, and make it fit in a way that is sustainable, so I don't find myself again near bottom.
Got it. So in that case, because you do have the self-awareness, not just on your own patterns, but it seems also how to navigate the uniqueness of how your brain operates, right? Like I know how to respond versus how to react. I'm pretty good at discerning, okay, like when do I got to pull myself out of a particular state? I'm sure you know the nutritional like things you need to do in order to maintain like proper balance of things, right? And we haven't dived into it, but I just get that feeling. So if all of these things are already in place and if you're navigated, it seems, pretty well, what is the actual problem that you're experiencing?
I think it feels like this loomingness that's I've been this way my whole life, that now it's almost like I gotta pull back on the gas and be like checking in with myself almost constantly. And that's almost annoying because I just like to drive. And I know that I can't drive all the time and I can't drive as fast as I want. And so it's in this season, it's a lot of what feels uncomfortable, which is slowing down almost to the point where I feel that I'm not even producing. But the reality is in this rest season, these breaks that I'm continuously taking now and implementing them into my work days has now lightened the load where I don't feel like everything is here and now and immediately and has to be done. And if it doesn't, then it's not, it just feels like it gets spiraled out of control. Um, so I'm in a season right now where there's rebuild, rebranding, reinventing, and a whole lot of rest involved. And so it seems like a whole lot of work, but it's so necessary to have that rest component. And that's something that I'm slowly navigating and experiencing kind of for the first time simultaneously.
Got it. So would it be accurate to say that recognizing the need to rest and how important it is to actually not blow yourself up, that while it's yielded like actual tangible results, meaning like I can see that I can navigate like my energy, I know how to respond, like all the stuff we talked about before, like I can ensure that I have consistent output, I'm not blowing myself up like I did before. The consequence of that, because you realize that the need for rest and that it's unrealistic to just keep having output high, that's creating some guilt around the rest, that's creating some resistance around the pauses. Like, would that be accurate, or is there something else?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely accurate because I don't like to rest when, especially if I'm in the middle of something. It's like, oh, timer goes off. I'm like, but I'm not done. And so I will just ignore the timer and just keep hyper focusing on whatever it is that I'm working on. Or there's timelines. And so again, understanding like time blindness is something that in a physical world, like I don't see time the way people do or manage that in regards. And then also the hyper focus. So there's kind of like two things I'm kind of just barely scratching the surface on both. And then you brought up about like guilt. I would say that there's moments of, I wouldn't say like guilt is maybe the right word, but there's that questioning like, well, I know the rest is important, but I'm not done over here. So it's like my brain still wants to go, and part of it's just kind of pulling it back. Um, so I feel like there's this constant dialogue conflict between my brain. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm still navigating that whole thing, which is great because now it's always something that I thought that I had, and now having that I guess validity behind it has really supported and has now given me that reason, instead of me kind of going down that negative self-talk trash talk, I guess is what you call it too, is oh, you're so stupid, why are you so slow, you can't get this done, look at everyone else doing it. And so it's easy to fall down to that trap. But now I'm recognizing like, no, it's because, and so giving myself that grace is allowing me to kind of come back to the present.
Got it. So there is I guess the experience of that cognitive dissonance, like when I am in this rest state or when I realize I need to take it and I'm trying to push away from doing the work, then it's almost like this inner critic, kicks in.
Mhm.
So it's not like guilt, but it's like the inner critic of you should push, there should be more performance, it's not done, what are you doing? So that seems more accurate than guilt.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yes. Okay. Perfect. So if you're not producing, then fill in the blank.
I'm not performing. And if I'm
Okay.
not performing, then I'm not living on purpose. And then I have to kind of go back and say, but remind myself of what my purpose is. And my purpose here is not to perform or produce, is to exist, is to serve, is to help, it's to be of service. And that's where I know that my purpose is to be of service to others. But for me, almost to have that the conflict back and forth is okay, but in order for you to serve, you have to produce. But that's not always the case. Because sometimes where I find the biggest value is just sometimes I just show up and I'll have a conversation, or I'll just be me, or I'm just me, myself, and I have made an impact. I've inspired somebody, or I lit up the room or lit up somebody's life at that moment just by simply showing up. And that's something that has been, I think, kind of a light bulb moment, because sometimes I think that in the acceptance of purpose, it has to come with a physical, tangible thing. And it's not always the case. And I think that's so important for even your listeners, thinking about you as a person, that you're more than what you do, you're more than what you have, and it's just simply about being. And in that being is where a lot of this rest and reflection and recovery and all the things are happening. But then if I'm not taking action on that, there is that dichotomy that goes back and forth. And so I guess it's almost like, how do I maintain or sustain, but not feel like this, it's a tug of war, if that makes sense.
So I think there's a lot in that response.
Yeah, it's
And
not a simple answer. I know.
yes. And okay, so I guess two things. So number one, you had said, you know, this beautifully articulated thing once again of like, okay, well, my purpose is to serve. So like that's more actually about being than it is about doing. And then when I try to be in that, the first thing I start thinking about is, well, how do I do that?
Yeah. I'm
Right.
like, okay, but if I'm just being, but how do I be? And so there's this, it's always almost always an constant energy exchange there. Like, for you to be, you have to give a lot. And it's like, but I don't have a lot to give, because sometimes I'm just tired or burn out or just need that rest.
Right.
And in
So
that rest,
by
that's
that,
where that yeah, just a reflection part. But yes.
yes. So I mean, even by that definition, as far as this part of you is concerned, the only way to be anything is to do it.
Mhm.
So is that actually true?
Yeah, because I think overall, being is just existing, but what is existence without action? Because you have to physically, whatever we manifest in our mind, we have to physically create. And so there's a the two-way street. Like, you can't just have one without the other. It's kind of like, you could think it, but it won't come into existence until you actually do it. And so there's that counterpart. And so finding that balance in between, and then being okay with it, and finding this as I'm navigating this new version of me, this new me, there's still a lot of that learning curve that I have to identify with, and create new patterns, new pathways, new beliefs, new identities. A lot of newness is coming up in this season that I'm in.
Okay, fair. So if you backtrack and rewind what we just, or what you just answered, are you describing manifestation or are you describing being?
Wait, describing being or manifestation?
Yeah, because what I heard from the outside looking in, it's like, okay, well, if I want to be something and bring something into the world, I have to do something with it. And I completely agree with you, right? So there's an aspect of my being that aligns with what it is that I'm doing so that I can like create it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is fine. But it gets very tricky if you're beginning to substitute different words for different things. Because to me, that sounds, what you're trying to describe is the output to manifest the things that you want to be of service for. But fundamentally, is that the same as being?
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, yeah. All right. So I see the difference, and now that you kind of position it that way, it makes more sense. But yes. So your question about being, correct?
Well, my question was, were you describing manifestation or were you describing being? Because a lot of your issues, as you've described them so far, are stemming from this desire to manifest more. Like the reason you need to rest is so that you can be okay and energized so you can do more. Like fundamentally, if we go down into like what were you basically like, well, what's the issue with the rest? It's like, well, because I can't get more things done.
Mm-hmm.
So were you actually describing being or were you describing manifestation?
Probably more of the manifestation aspect of it.
Okay. So I think that's very important, right? Because there's a part of you that's searching for being and it's confusing it or distorting it with actually, well, more manifestation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Put a different way is, how do you do peace? How do you do happiness? How do you do contentment?
You experience it.
Okay.
It's just through existing, like just taking it all in, like awareness aspect of it, I think.
Right. But there's a part of you that's chasing that through doing.
Mm-hmm.
So can you do, like, what comes first, the being or the doing?
The being comes first, because that's when I really figure out,
Well,
like,
so, okay,
okay,
is
what it
that
is.
actually true for you right now? Because to me, it sounds like you're actually doing so that you can have and therefore be, right? I'm doing whatever it is I need to do so I can have more impact and service and that I can be content and feel like I'm in my purpose.
Hmm. Maybe I gotta ask backwards again right now. Because it's the irony of that is because in my, I call it now like my former version, because I'm in this new season I'm in right now, I flipped the whole script on that, and it was about being, then doing, and then having. And I think now at this season that I'm in, somehow I flipped those two in indirectly. And I think it's because I'm just trying to do, in the sense of navigating this new version of me, and I have to kind of take in all the things first before I can then sit down and assess it. Um, but yeah, I think there's a bit of truth in that aspect, and maybe in the season I kind of flip flopped it while I'm still working through it. But yeah, to answer that, you have to be first. You have to know all this, the identity, the purpose, the mission, like all the intricacies of who you are, because without knowing that, there is no doing, because you don't know your capabilities. You don't know what that next step is. Um, and so I think right now it's a lot of learning, relearning myself too.
So in that case, what do you feel like you need to be in this new season?
Less.
Okay.
I need
What do
I
you mean
need
by that?
to I need to be less on feeling like I have to do all the things, less in the performance, less time and energy, so that I have preservation for myself while I'm doing a lot of this inner work. Um, just simplifying life overall.
Okay.
So that's kind of that approach of less is more. And in the season, I need a whole lot less so I can be, do, and have a whole lot more later.
Okay. So would it be accurate to say that that's essentially what you need or what you're striving for? That's not necessarily who you need to be. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I need to be in the focus of less. It's not really describing what you need to be in this chapter of your life. Like, I need to feel like I need to do less. I need to feel like I don't need to do more. I feel like I need to just perform less to be okay. So, if all of that was happening, who would you be?
Me. And I really like me. Like it took
Well,
a lot to even get to that point.
sure. And you always are me. So we'll just get more specific. Understand, yes, that is true. You're right. And what aspects of you are you not being right now because you're missing all these states of less?
I'm not being as present as I want. I'm not being as as what's the word I'm looking for? I think present is first and foremost, because I feel like I'm spread thin still. And it's like I want to be present with my family, with my loved ones. I want to be present in this new chapter and really take it all in. And in those moments of just being present and aware, really that the simple act of gratitude is really, it helps bring me centered and in that present moment. Um, and in that is where I get to fully experience what life is showing me, what it's offering me, opportunities. And this is something that I have personally experienced even lately, is when I am less, it creates more and more opportunities, more connections, more freedom, more moments of being just grateful, and I find myself just smiling and lighting up for nothing, and it's because I'm just in this in this moment. um and I think sometimes I think that when I run out of that feeling, I have to go do to create more of that same feeling.
Okay. So I think that's also very important because it means those feelings of freedom, of presence, of essentially what it sounds like to me, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially self-acceptance, I have a hard time getting unless it's correlated and conditional to output, performance, and action.
I'm not sure about that one.
Mm-hmm.
um I think also partly where this doing aspect comes in is because it's like I'm trying to get a lot done so that I can create more time to fully ride out that experience instead of having them just come in bits and pieces. So it's almost like a race to the finish line to complete so that I can have more time to just be. And in the being is where a lot of that acceptance is. A lot of, and what I have found even recently is a lot of contentment. And so I've been using that word kind of frequently in the season I'm in, is because with contentment, it it means everything's just kind of even keel, and that's where I'm really finding myself again. I'm being content and just being grateful, and that keeps me grounded. So yeah, I think it's just kind of, I guess, just navigating this new terrain.
Okay. So in that case, if you lost the ability to work, you lost the ability to take this much action and produce this much output, could you be any of the things you desired? Present,
Yeah,
free, like felt free, content, etc.
100%.
Yet that eludes you right now
Mm-hmm.
when you have the ability to work. So is that really true?
As long as I got my brain in my mouth, I'm good. I
So
can
I know you
always think and I can
intellectually,
always communicate. Yeah. So as long, like, and that's the thing, like, from that perspective, I've always considered that too, because obviously when you're self-employed, you do have to consider those um, worst case scenarios. And as long as that I know that I am able to still be in that space that's creative and creating my world and my impact and all the things that I have done up until this point, I know that I can continue that as long as I am in I have my intellect and my voice and my existence. But as far as like the physical of actual doing stuff, yeah, that would definitely be a game changer. um but it's definitely something that to consider, I guess.
So what do you mean specifically? Like, consider what?
Bringing that to the forefront of where I'm at, and taking that into consideration, like not that everything has to get done and has to get done now, because what if those moments are robbing you tomorrow? And so how about just being present here today and thinking that, what is this gift that you are gifted with today, and making the most of it. And that is something, in this season I'm in, is about, again, slowing down and rest and recovering and doing all that stuff. But yet there's still that old piece of me that says, no, we got to go, we got to go. And so, yeah, I think I'm just trying to tiptoe that fine line until I can really embrace this newness of it all.
Mm-hmm. And that part of you that continues to want to go and that has this need, and it seems like it's like the inner critic part. Like it's like you go because it tells you stop slowing down, what it is like, don't be so stupid, like you got to keep going. Like, would it be accurate to say that that's the inner critic part of you that drives that, or they're like two
Yeah, I
different
would.
parts?
No, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's just the way my brain is wired, but also the expectations that I place on myself. I I am very, yeah, I'm my own worst critic, and I'm always going to hold myself to a standard that I know that I'm capable of. And if I'm not meeting that expectation, there is kind of that it pipes up and says, you know what, you can do more. Why didn't you do this? Why? And so yeah, there is that conversational piece that does happen. And so when it does take place, I recognize between the two, like, okay, that's not really me. So having that understanding allows me now to put the division between it, where my former self, like the one that ended up at the bottom of the pit, had no idea what was what. I thought that was true. I thought that was like the me speaking to me. And it's like, it's not. That's just your negative self-talk. It's your inner critic. It's the one that will always pull you down. And so it's the one that shouts the loudest, and that's the voice that will always win, until you can go inward and listen to that whisper, that little voice that is actually who you are. And that's the conversations I want to have with that version of me.
Okay. And then right now you feel like that's the voice that dominates more often.
Yeah, at this time.
Okay. So then why do you think there's such a strong need to continue to do?
Because it's like it hasn't recognized the difference between what I'm physically capable of doing versus what mentally I'm capable of doing. And so there's just that point of physical burnout, exhaustion. Like, there's a capacity that has been reached. And once I get to coming up on the capacity level, it's kind of that inner thought will say, well, you still got room to go. And it's like, no, 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 we don't. We have to slow down. We kind of have to deplete some of what that is, so that we still have more energy to fulfill the things that we're eventually going to achieve. Just doesn't have to be done right now.
Right. So that constant battle is still raging internally. Whereas just
Mm-hmm.
before it was, I completely believe that voice. But now I, that voice kind of propels me into a whole lot of action. And then at some point I have to check that voice and be like, no, hey, hold on. We got to push the brakes on here. Otherwise we're going to blow ourselves up. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's a lot more frequent check-ins.
Okay. So would it then just be safe to say the same voice, the same part still drives you as the primary action taker? You've just gotten better at keeping it in check.
I would think so. Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's a very important distinction, because it's like, the same inner monster is the one that's essentially running the show. I've just gotten a lot better at managing it, which is obviously an improvement and it's something to be celebrated. And is it actually the part, if it's driving you forward, that can actually create the vision of your future that includes freedom, contentment, peace, presence, if it's actually driving from this place of judgment and inner critic?
No, because those are two different voices.
Correct. So I think the big linchpin in everything that you've mentioned And usually where this part is bred from, right, is some aspect of I'm not good enough or unworthiness. Because our ability to accept rest as a
Mhm.
normal part of the process of output, it's like breathing, right? Like, is it wrong? Like, what's worse, to inhale or to exhale? I don't know. Both are needed. Like, you can't have one without the other. It's the same thing with output and rest. You can't have continuous output without the rest needed to be able to output more. So it's like this whole, like, intellectually, you understand everything that's needed as far as who do I need to be? What do I want that to look like? I can understand all of the patterns. I've gotten really good at not believing this voice completely. But then when it comes to output in general and where I want to go, the part that's actually feeding my forward motion is that same wounded part. I haven't actually made peace and transcended and eliminated that. I've just gotten better at navigating it. And this next chapter of my life is really asking for me to transcend that so that I can step into the next version, not chasing doing so I can be present, free, and content, but actually be present, free, and content and create from that inspiration rather than the desperation of running away from this stuff. So, what lands for you there?
I mean, they both speak to me. And I think even now, I mean, it's the whole inspiration aspect of it. So in this presence, like when I am present and I really get to tap into that, the real me, not the inner critic judgmental version of me that's always going to tell me it's not enough and keep pushing. It's in when I'm in that space is where creativity and inspiration just light me up. And then immediately I'm like, oh, let's go with it. Because the excitement of it, the dopamine kick lights me up. And then I get to performing. And then sometimes I'm like, wait, hold on. I know that's bringing you all the joy and the happiness and the dopamine kick, but we're not done over here. And so sometimes, like I said, just finding that balance, I guess. Um, but yeah, inspiration and creativity is something that just I get a lot of it quite often. And sometimes even that becomes too much, becomes overwhelming. And I don't know how to, sometimes I'm reactive about it, like, oh my gosh, I got to do it all. Oh, it's so exciting. And that's kind of where I have to keep that at bay and say, no, let's, you know, prioritize, let's manage, let's figure out the processes and the systems. And then I don't know how much you know about ADHD is we don't really have those capabilities. So then I got to go figure over here, like figure that out. So it just feels like this. That's why I say about going, swimming upstream or going against the grain. It's twice as hard because we understand what is missing. And so it's about navigating new systems to complement what we don't have. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the best way I can kind of describe it in this moment. So that's why I say there's this reactive part is because we can't actually do the things yet because we have to figure this part out over here, which then takes time. And as time lapses, then these things start building up and then becomes kind of stacked and overwhelmed. And that's about just managing what you can do in a way that still prevents your energy from feeling depleted. And that's kind of where that rest period is necessary. And this is how I'm understanding it. And so this is how I'm navigating through it. Does that make sense? Did I
No,
explain it?
it definitely does make
Okay.
sense, and I understand that there's like layers and overlaps to all of these pieces, right? It's not a matter of discounting one or the other. It really just comes back to this is what I desired. These are all of the issues that are standing in the way of that, and this is where I'm not looking at 100%. But yeah, of course, there's gonna, like, this is not a binary thing of it is this or it is that. It is the spectrum of these things and how they ultimately affect you, just like the solution for them is going to be a spectrum of moving into new patterns, releasing the need for all of this work, recognizing the unworthiness that drives it so that it's you're not spending so much energy hemorrhaging your efforts fighting against it and managing it and decreasing its effects. Cumulatively, that makes for a space where you can create all the systems, put the boundaries in place, have peaceful rest from that space of more inspiration, peace, presence, and contentment, right? Like all of the things that you described that you wanted. So yes, I think that's landing, and that absolutely makes sense. And then just because we are limited on time, um, like, does that feel complete for you, or is there still something left outstanding?
No, it does. And it's kind of just even in our conversation, kind of giving what I feel is like this mess inside some little bits of understanding more, like as if they've all kind of taken the shape. And that's why through conversation has always been helpful for me, because kind of talking it out, you see the mess, quote, for those listening, quote, mess inside now take shape, and now you can identify what those things are and categorize them, and approach them in a way systematically that works best for you in those moments or seasons that you're in. So yeah, I think just overall kind of bringing that clarity to what I see in there, and kind of how, when it comes from like to a place of like organization, for example, would be picking out each of those pieces and now saying, okay, this is that thing, this is that thing, this is that thing. So now when they're all laid out, you see how they connect. Um, and that has always just been the way I've learned, from a visual, but also a comprehensional standpoint as well.
Beautiful. Well, yeah. So I'm glad that that's landing for you. Yeah. So why don't you just close us off by letting everybody know where to find you, who's the best person to find you. Floor is yours for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've been opening up and sharing more about this journey in my community, which is the Confident Woman community. Also on my social media, all my handles are I am Rachel Brooks. And of course, you can find more about me on my website, IamRachelBrooks.com. And of course, if you want to learn more about the journey of how I even got here, check out my book, Chasing Perfection, A Journey to Healing, Fitness, and Self-Love. So
Love it.
that's, we put it all together in one place to go, and that's why I have everything on my website. So just to make it simple, go to there.
Awesome. Well, see, organizations, you
Mhm.
can actually do it. It's just one thing, right? So it's all good.
Right, right, right. Yeah, it was nice just putting it all in one place. I am RachelBrooks.com. You can connect with me, learn about that, and just everything that I have to be of service and of offer for those who are kind of struggling or just curious to learn more, all in one place.
Love it. Well, as always, we'll include that in the show notes. But Rachel, thank you very much for being on, and for best listening. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.